Welcome, friends. Thank you for joining us. My name is Robin LeBlanc. I use she and her pronouns, and I am an improvement advisor with Built for Zero Canada, with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and I will be your moderator today. So before we begin, I know we've done several land acknowledgements, but I think it's really important again in every space that we enter to acknowledge that we are honored to be here today. Mostly as guests on the ancestral, traditional and unceded territory of Mi'kmaq, the homelands of the Mi'kmaq peoples. So today we are here to talk about veterans. So the session today, I'm so sorry, I had this all up to read you a lovely description. There we go. So today we're going to talk about what we know about veteran homelessness in Canada. We're going to hear about the latest available information and hear from two key organizations that are working to respond to homeless veterans across Canada, including Vets Canada and the Royal Canadian Legion. So first, we're going to hear from Marie Morrison, Director of Built for Zero Canada, on the picture of veteran homelessness in Canada and what Built for Zero is doing. We're going to hear from Debbie Lowther from Vets Canada on the view from the streets. And we're also going to hear from a video from Dave Gordon from the Royal Canadian Legion as well. So presenters will speak, and then at the end, we'll have some time for hopefully a really good dialogue and some question and answers around what is happening with veteran homelessness. So with that, I'll pass it off to Marie.
Thanks so much, Robin, and welcome everyone. My name is Marie Morrison. I'm the director of Built for Zero. I use she, her pronouns. Very excited to be here in Halifax to chat about what we're doing around veteran homelessness and other partners in this space. So just to kind of place where we're at, the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness has a number of initiatives, including, of course, the conference as one of those areas, social enterprise training, policy and data work, allied networks, and then Built for Zero is one of those initiatives. So Built for Zero works towards a community by community, population by population based end to homelessness. Starting with chronic and veteran homelessness is the first steps to ending all homelessness in Canada. So we are seeking to create a tipping point in Canada with enough functional zero proof points demonstrating that homelessness can be rare and brief, that this is not an untractable or unsolvable problem, and that really we get to a point where ending homelessness becomes the expectation in every community. When we started to work on the journey around veteran homelessness in 2019, we were really new to this space and there was a lot of learning. And I know there's a lot of experts in the room today, and I hope we get to have a great discussion. And we thank you for all of support and guidance that you're showing as we do this work. So one of the things when we started as well was just sort of understanding sort of the context of veteran, military, and homelessness in Canada. And so just pulling together a little bit of a summary of some statistics. Census 2021 was the first time in 50 years when any data was collected on veterans. And so at that point, identifying just over 460,000, which would be approximately 1.5% of the Canadian population age 17 and over. And, you know, as we've heard in other presentations, this isn't likely an underrepresentation, given that folks need to self-identify as veterans, and not all would necessarily, so we know that. Looking at some demographics, 1 in 6 veterans in Canada are women. We know this is growing. Currently serving in the military, that number is 1 in 5. Indigenous folks are overrepresented in comparison to the number identified in the census population. So we have a greater representation of Indigenous folks who are veterans. And I want to just bring a little bit of my learning and truth, and others may have others, but to just really acknowledge the history and the current experience of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people to really inform the work that we do and to stop perpetuating the damages of colonization. So I think it's important to understand that over the years, Canadian policies have harmed many Indigenous veterans who've served as equals on the battlefield, but not at home. It was not until 1995, 50 years after the Second World War, that Indigenous people were allowed to lay Remembrance Day wreaths at the National War Memorial. After the First World War, returning veterans did not receive the same assistance as other returned soldiers. Many First Nations veterans in the Second World War had to either give up their Indian status to join the war effort or found that when they returned home, they no longer held that status. Under the Indian Act, if you left the reserve for more than 4 years, you could lose your status. Restrictions within the Indian Act prevented veterans from learning about benefits and programs, and when they did access those benefit, grant payouts were given to the Indian agent rather than the individual. The lives of numerous Indigenous veterans ended in despair and poverty, including Tommy Prince, the most decorated Indigenous war veteran who in 1977 died homeless at the age of 62 in Winnipeg. Indigenous veteran homelessness in Canada highlights the cumulative ways in which homelessness, former military service, and Indigenous identity intersect to create unique risk factors that we should all be aware of. So I also say folks sometimes think, veterans are older folks, and through the census identified that less or just around 40% are age 65 and over. When we think about the location of veterans, it's not surprising that the highest percentage are in our most populous provinces of Ontario and Quebec. But I found it interesting just to understand there's a greater proportion of veterans in areas such as Belleville, Ontario, Halifax, Kingston, Fredericton, and St. John. So what do we know about veteran homelessness? And there's some different reports that have made different estimates on that number. So yesterday in the presentation, I know, Vac, you had said 2,500. We've seen reports up to 5,000. The last point in time count, the national point in time count from taking place between 2020 and 2022, identified 5% of folks experiencing veteran homelessness. A study found that women veterans are 4 times more likely to experience homelessness than those who did not serve in the military. Estimated that at least 32% face challenges transitioning to civilian life after service. And that, we see a lot of, I think, similar issues or pathways into homelessness for people, but this is one that is definitely unique to the veteran population. And we know that there can be a lag time between when someone was released from service and when they have that experience of homelessness. And again, I've seen different estimates. One study found that was 14 years on average. So as we've been doing this work with communities, there have been a lot of sort of questions or myths. And so we've put together, and we'll continue to evolve this as we hear it and we get further information, but a bit of a myths and facts sheet of the 24 kind of common things that we hear and answers to them available on our website. So why should we focus on solving veteran homelessness? Not only do we think ending veteran or homelessness generally, of course, is the right thing to do, but Canadians owe a duty of care to veterans for the sacrifices they made and continue to make for their service. While these numbers are small relative to the broader homelessness population, solving for veteran homelessness helps to prove that it's possible, that if we put all the right pieces in place, again, that homelessness is not an intractable problem, but a solvable one. Veterans are a small and well-defined population for which we can rapidly build proof points and test approaches to ending homelessness. So we know ending homelessness is a big job. So this is really helping to shrink that change, to focus efforts on a population and then take that learning to the next population, all being sort of part of a process overall for ending homelessness. And it helps to build support. I think not only can it help build momentum locally, it can help raise awareness, it can help reinforce and support efforts and instill confidence in the systems working together to end homelessness. And it gives government the confidence to put in best practices and focus on proven approaches. Really setting the foundation for ending all homelessness. So we're learning what it takes to end veteran homelessness. And again, we enter this work really humbly with lots of learning to do. And we are doing that learning alongside 25 communities within Built for Zero who've kind of put their hand up and said, yeah, we want to focus on ending veteran homelessness. And we're already seeing success within this group. You've likely heard that London, St. Thomas, Elgin, and Fort McMurray, Alberta have confirmed and announced a milestone that we call Functional Zero for veteran homelessness. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. But if you want to hear more from those communities, there's a session tomorrow at 10 where there'll be a panel and they'll be sharing their stories and experiences and learning. So what are some of those keys to ending veteran homelessness? We think it takes shared aim and definitions. It takes having quality, real-time, comprehensive data on veteran homelessness, being able to coordinate between the homelessness response sector and veteran service organizations, and to use data to drive improvement and target resources. And we're going to walk through each of these a little bit more. Communities start by forming local teams that take responsibility for solving veteran homelessness. That doesn't mean they have to do it all, but it means they are saying, you know what, we're going to gather together and we're going to facilitate this local effort in our community. And these teams set longer term and short term aims. They work to reach milestones on the pathway to zero, beginning with what we call a by name list. And we'll say a little bit more about that, but that's essentially having a comprehensive, shared understanding across your community of all the veterans who are experiencing homelessness who've consented to be a part of that list. And I think you really can't say that you have ended veteran homelessness or that you don't have. We've heard a lot of communities say, we don't have any veterans experiencing homelessness. And I think until you've done this comprehensive work, you don't know that. And I think until you've gone through the process of, working through the data and ensuring that your systems are set up to effectively identify status and house veterans, that you can't say you've ended it. And I think another learning we've had is that small numbers still require the same data-informed and coordinated response. And this work would not be possible, and it is done in partnership with many veteran services organizations who've been at the work of, preventing and ending veteran homelessness for many years. And I think the magic in what we're seeing is now the homelessness response sector, who traditionally does not know a lot about military experience, veteran services organizations, and what's available. It's the magic in really coming together and working together on this issue. So another definition we want to get clear on is who's considered a veteran. And we work to align this with the Veteran Affairs Canada definition. Any former member of the Canadian Armed Forces, along with members of an allied force, former members of the RCMP, former reservists, veteran civilians, and former Canadian Rangers. So what do we mean by functional zero? This is a dynamic measurement that is a milestone towards identifying and working towards sustaining an end to veteran homelessness. So when the number of veterans experiencing homelessness is less than or equal to the number of veterans a community has proven it can house in a month, or 3 or less, whichever is greater, holding that for at least 3 consecutive months, and then working with us on a checklist that really drives down into that data, again, to make sure it's quality, to ensure that the systems and coordination are in place to help sustain that effort ongoing. And as I mentioned, this starts by having data that you can come around the table with. We know that homelessness is constantly changing. You need a clear picture of who's coming in, who's exiting, what are the current number of folks that are experiencing homelessness across your community. And we help communities to confirm the quality of this data through scorecards and other tools. We've learned that veterans may be hesitant to indicate they've served for many reasons, and you can't just ask, are you a veteran? So we encourage communities to instead ask, have you served in the Canadian or Allied Armed Forces or participated in basic training? Are you a former member of the RCMP? And once someone self-identifies as a veteran, the community confirms this information through the Royal Canadian Legion or Veteran Affairs Canada. And this is important to ensure we have an accurate account of veterans on the by name list, and it positions communities to be able to quickly access veteran-specific supports that can help end their homelessness. And again, there are a number of resources to help veterans. And so if we can help veterans tap into those resources, that can help end their homelessness. It also helps free up resources for other folks who are homeless to be able to assist them as well. And is Cheryl Forchuk still in the room? There she is. Cheryl, I'm going to talk about some of your work now. There was a big study done in Canada that Cheryl was a part of in London, working with 4 communities across Canada, looking at different models and supports of what it takes to end veteran homelessness. And out of that came a number of key considerations. So when we now think of sort of the work of providing service to veterans experiencing homelessness, we would look to these things. And I know you're getting this presentation afterwards, but I did want to just highlight, there's a number of reports and materials that you can look at from that study, the Canadian Model for Housing and Support for Veterans Experiencing Homelessness. And we took that and we had some short presentations done that also help unpack some of those materials. So all of that's available on our website. And that website here, Built for Zero Canada, under the circled resources, when you click there, a drop down will come down, and then you select the one called Veteran Homelessness, where we talk about how we're defining an end to veteran homelessness. That ending veteran homelessness is not just possible, it's already happening, both in Canada and the US. Key veteran service organizations and their homelessness response, including, of course, Vets Canada, which is here with us today. And I will say Royal Canadian Legion was not able to be here because they're busy preparing for some of the events and couldn't make it. So we brought a video just to share because we really wanted you to know what is available through Royal Canadian Legion as well. Veteran and veteran homelessness in Canada information, training tools and resources to end veteran homelessness. And we've just released a bit of a guide for ending veteran homelessness. So what we've learned so far for communities and tips and resources, tried to put that all into one document. This is sort of an early version. We'll continue to evolve it as we learn more and as we move forward. If you want to track where communities are at in their progress along some of these milestones, you can go to our website again under Track Our Progress. There are some dashboards for chronic homelessness. Right below that, there are dashboards for veteran homelessness. And you can just click on the province. You can see the participating communities and where they're at in the process. I'm having trouble getting this side. So any community that has what we call a quality by name list for veteran homelessness will also have a public dashboard. So I just wanted to show you what that looks like. Here is London's veteran by name list data. You know, one of the things with Built for Zero is sometimes your numbers don't always look good, but we encourage communities to share this. This is part of data bravery. It's part of telling the real story about what's happening in community. You can see here that the end of October 2020, London, from a numbers standpoint, reached functional zero. They'd held 3 or less for 3 consecutive months. Their numbers popped up a bit. We did some work to confirm their functional zero, and then it was announced in February, and they held that pretty much for almost a year before their numbers went up. And they're going to tell you a bit of that story about what's going on in their community and how they kept using this data to identify that was happening and to pinpoint what do we need to do next to push that number back down. And what this doesn't show, this is just the number of veterans actively experiencing homelessness at the end of each month. What it doesn't show is the dynamic inflow and outflow that's happening. Over this time, they've housed 68 veterans. And you can imagine if they weren't doing this work, how much larger this issue would be. So what we've learned about ending veteran homelessness, it is a dynamic problem that is constantly changing. And what it took to reach that functional zero isn't necessarily what it's going to be taking to continue to sustain it. It's really problem solving each and every month to keep that number there. And we know that the numbers may increase from time to time, but again, important just to continue to be accountable to that, to think about and problem solve what are our next steps. If you were interested also in hearing more, we did a webinar earlier this year with London talking about their journey and what they've been doing around sustaining. They've been, of course, the longest community, having been at a veteran functional zero for a couple of years now. So that is what I had to share today. Thank you very much. I'm just going to close this up and get Debbie's presentation up here. There you go, Debbie. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Debbie Lowther, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Vets Canada. So today I'm just going to talk about a little bit about who we are, what we do, and a project that we worked on for VAC this past year. And I'm going to finish up by reading a letter from a veteran that we provided support to. So Vets Canada, we are a federally registered charity. We began here in Halifax in 2010. We are a volunteer-driven organization. We've got hundreds of volunteers across the country. We have a very small staff of paid folks. We rely mostly on volunteers. Our headquarters is here in Halifax. We are governed by a board of directors and, as I mentioned, hundreds of volunteers across the country. We provide face-to-face support, online support, telephone assistance to homeless and at-risk veterans and veterans who are in crisis in other ways. In 2014, we were awarded a contract by Veterans Affairs, and we've been mainly funded by them since that time. And since starting in 2010, we've responded to thousands of requests for assistance from veterans across the country. So how do we do what we do? We use a proactive and a reactive approach. So initially when we first started, we walked the streets, visited shelters, and so we were doing that proactive piece where we were actually looking for veterans that might need some help. So visiting shelters, just speaking to anybody that's on the streets. As we've evolved, we've started taking referrals from other organizations, so shelters, other community organizations, police departments will reach out to us. Most of our referrals do come from Veterans Affairs, other organizations as well, but Veterans Affairs case managers make up more than 80% of the referrals that we receive. We have a large social media following, so veterans can reach out to us that way as well. Boots on the ground. So as I mentioned, when we first started, we would walk the streets, visit shelters, and so we started calling those our boots on the ground walks. We haven't done those since pre-COVID. We are looking to get back at doing those as well. In doing the boots on the ground walks, we wouldn't often find a lot of veterans that way. So that kind of turned into more of an opportunity for us to engage with the community, to kind of, shine a spotlight on the fact that there are veterans who are living homeless on the streets, and just to raise awareness about the fact that there are services available for those veterans. We do some special annual events. Tour of Duty is a boots on the ground walk that we were doing every year on a specific day. We would do a number of cities across the country. The last one we had 21 cities across the country where we did boots on the ground walks, just to really kind of put a push on raising awareness of the issue. And then In Her Boots, every year in March on International Women's Day, we visit the women's shelters in areas across the country. And we do have a phone line that's manned 24/7, so veterans can reach out to us at any time, and there will be a voice on the other end of the phone to provide support. And what we do, basically we come up with a plan to meet the needs of each veteran that comes to us. We don't have a kind of a standard checklist of the supports that we provide. We listen to the veteran's story and come up with a plan with them to help them out of homelessness or prevent homelessness, whatever their situation might be. So we can take somebody off the streets and put them into temporary accommodations, whether that be a hotel or here in Halifax, we actually have 5 transitional apartments that we have access to. So we put veterans in there. We can make rent payments to prevent eviction or pay first and last month's rent to move somebody into new housing, help with furniture and clothing, household items, food. We also will help with utilities payments, transportation, tools to secure employment, medications, anything that we can do basically to keep that veteran stable and in their housing if they are already housed, or to help get them into housing if they are homeless. There's only a few things that we don't do. As I mentioned, we do come up with this plan with the veterans. We do not provide clinical support. We recognize that we are not clinicians, so we kind of stay in our lane when it comes to that. If we recognize that a veteran might need that extra support, then that's when we rely on our friends at Veterans Affairs. We engage the Veterans Affairs case managers to help in those situations. We don't pay off personal debt and we don't provide loans. So the project that we did with Veterans Affairs started about a year ago. VAC was seeking to gain an understanding of the scope and nature of veterans' homelessness so that they could ensure that supports were directed towards the veterans who needed them. So we were asked to conduct outreach across the country to collect some data on the numbers of veterans and some other identifying factors. So we identified the number and location of homeless and at-risk veterans across the country, including Indigenous, LGBTQ2, and women veterans. We offered support to the veterans that we did come in contact with. So we sent volunteers out to all the shelters across the country, and in areas that were more remote that we couldn't get to, we made phone calls and followed up with staff at hotels. We reached out to local police departments in different areas across the country so that we could gain access to these veterans so that we could ensure that we were having as accurate information as we possibly could. Veterans were always connected with Veterans Affairs for benefits that they might be entitled to. As I mentioned, we visited shelters, soup kitchens, food banks, tent cities, anywhere that we could find veterans that might need some support. Many accepted our offer of help and many did not. They were quite happy to remain where they were. So that's their right to determine how they want to live their life. So that's up to them. The project provided accurate data on the number of homeless and at-risk veterans and endeavored to improve their access to supports and services across the country. It's just a map of the areas where we were. And this is the result of that study that we did. As you can see, we identified this was over the course of a year. We took this information, 2,330 veterans in total. Women accounted for 17.4%. Indigenous veterans accounted for 6%, and LGBTQ almost 3%. And we did do a breakdown of towns and cities that were available. So I do have that information as well, not with me, but if anybody's interested, you can reach out to me and I can provide that information. And I'm going to grab my water. So I'm just going to read this letter that was provided to us by a veteran that we supported a few years ago. He just reached out to us just this past summer. And he said, "To whom it may concern, I am one of the lucky ones. I was a homeless veteran who stumbled into the most dangerous homeless shelter in Canada at the corner of Dundas and Sherbourne, East East Streets in downtown Toronto. I like to call it the Jerry Springer Corner because of the characters that live there. A buddy of mine staying at the shelter one day made a snarky remark to a man in a suit as he walked past. Within 15 minutes, he was surrounded by a dozen men and beaten and stabbed to death right in front of me. Turns out that man in the suit was the neighborhood pimp. I was one of the lucky ones. I escaped this insanely crazy world of never-ending poverty, food insecurity, and potentially life-altering and life-ending violence. I escaped with a lot of help from Vets Canada. Within days of calling their toll-free number, they had saved me from the streets of Toronto by placing me in a nice room at a local hotel. That first night was the first night in a long time that instead of sleeping on a dirty concrete floor within a couple inches of the next homeless person at the shelter, I slept in a nice, warm, and comfy bed. You really don't know how much a bed means until you do not have one. Like me, many ex-Canadian Armed Forces members find themselves on the streets. Serving changes you, sometimes for the good. I still make sure my kit is wrinkle-free and perfectly polished, even if I'm just going to the gym. Sometimes for the bad, being trained to follow orders, told where to go and what to do. Living with people that no matter how much they make fun of you, you know they will always have your back. Then suddenly you're released into a world where no one is there to give you orders. No one tells you where to go and what to do. And most people will stab you in the back and take advantage of your honesty and helpfulness. Vets Canada kept me in that hotel and fought for me to keep me at the top of the waiting list for a subsidized veterans housing unit, where I now live, with other Canadian vets that have gone through incredible challenges after their service to their country. While I was homeless, Vets Canada helped me with food, shelter, anything I needed, but the biggest help was their daily calling to the manager of the veterans housing unit, ensuring that I was next on the list. Because you don't know how much a home means until you do not have one, and Vets Canada stayed by my side and did not leave me until I did have a home again. I'm forever grateful to Vets Canada and Veterans Affairs Canada, even to the sometimes rough around the edges shelter workers, because without all these amazing people, I would not be housed. I may not even be alive. The streets are a dangerous place. Most do not escape. I was one of the lucky ones. Vets Canada saved my life. I am one of the lucky ones. Having a safe and affordable home has given me the opportunity to really turn my life around. I took a career assessment, went through a security guard training program, and recently was promoted at the security guard company I work for. I have food in my fridge, clean clothes on my back, and my own bed to sleep in my own home. A home I would never have found living on the streets. Being homeless is a daily, nightly, all the time fight just to survive. Being homeless keeps people from getting a home. Without organizations like Vets Canada, many homeless veterans, good, honest, hardworking people that did unspeakable things to keep you and your loved ones safe and secure here in Canada, would die alone, homeless on the streets of our cities and towns. If you have any questions or want to learn more about how Vets Canada helped me, please feel free to call or email me, which obviously I'm not going to give you his email address. And then I'm just going to end by sharing I can run this as a video. Is everybody awake now? Where we're going to go to the thing.
Hello, 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 hello. Okay, wonderful. Uh, Yeah, so had talked to the Royal Canadian Legion, and because we're so close to Remembrance Day, they were not able to come, but had asked them to prepare some videos and some information. So Dave Gordon, who started what is called Operation Leave the Streets Behind in Ontario, uh, is now at Dominion Command nationally and is supporting rolling out and further sort of deepening this program across Canada. And so he has prepared a video in both English and French. It's a little bit longer. I also have the transcript. So all of this is going to get uploaded afterwards. The Ontario command where this started has put together one with a PowerPoint. It's about 13 minutes long. So we're just going to watch that now, and I'm going to let Robin take care of the volume on this.
Operation Leave the Streets Behind started in 2009. We rolled it out when it was brought to our attention by a gentleman named Joe Sweeney, who is a Korean War veteran, that there was a real homeless veterans problem, and he pointed this out at the Scott Mission in Toronto on November the 11th, 2009, when the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, the Honourable David Ongley, was a guest speaker there. They asked the people who attended the lunch if they'd ever served, and it was brought to everyone's attention that a lot of veterans have been made homeless for a number of reasons. So Ontario Command decided they should do something about that. There's three types of homelessness. We have absolute homelessness, which are veterans who are living on the streets in temporary shelters and encampments. We have relative homelessness, where the basic standards for protection from the elements is not there, it's not safe. They may have difficulty gaining employment, and they're living in temporary accommodations. And then we have at risk of homelessness, and this is growing every day. This is our couch surfers. These are people who are spending much more than 50% on their housing. And we are finding this group grows every day because of food insecurity and the problem finding housing and maintaining rent. The Legion's definition of a veteran. As you can see, we are very broad in our scope. We try to help anyone who is a veteran, be it a Canadian veteran, American veteran, any veteran at all, we will try to assist if possible. As you can see, our definition is fairly broad. I always get asked, why would a veteran be homeless? Well, after they're released from the military, the average is about 3.5 years or less because of the style of living that the military envelops. And it's because they are told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Everything's looked after for them. And all of a sudden at release, they're responsible for everything in their life. And actually the 3.5 years is much less now. I'm actually finding still serving veterans, finding themselves in a predicament where they are spending more than 50% on their accommodations, or they're living in their cars. Some veterans are just fed up with the bureaucracy. They don't want the paperwork. So, and mental illness, of course, can also contribute. Why veterans don't seek help? My favorite is that they always feel that someone else is more deserving. They may not even realize that they can apply for something through Veterans Affairs Canada. They may have been told that they were denied a claim, and they just don't retry to see if maybe things have changed. They're tired of the bureaucracy, and they have no patience for it. The Legion's Homeless Veterans Assistance Fund can provide veterans with just about anything that you can think of, and we probably already have. We help with everything that slips through the cracks, basically. And this can be for Canadian ex-service personnel. This could be for someone who fought overseas. We may not be able to assist them through Veterans Affairs Canada, but we have other agencies in other countries that can assist. I want to point out that the definition of a dependent is a child who is solely dependent on the veteran for food, clothing, and shelter. These aren't boomerang children that have left home and then come back to live with mom and dad. And our assistance is pretty broad, as you can see. We've helped veterans when they can't find funding for utilities, for drug addiction, for cell phones. We're here and we take every case on its own merit, so we investigate each and then we assist when possible. Our application process, we've tried to make it as simple as possible, so you can go to our website, click on the Find Out More, and all of the forms are there as a PDF through the hyperlinks. They're fillable forms, and then you just print them, sign them, and send them back either by fax, by the email addresses at the bottom of the form. Our form is very basic. It is a 2-page form. It is fully fillable, and then you can print it and sign, but it is important that we have a wet signature on the bottom. We try to keep this very simple. We're trying not to be invasive, but the more information we can get, the better it is for us to try and help this veteran. We like to know the shelter, if they're in a shelter, the shelter's phone number, any contact information, any service detail that they can give us, because sometimes the files have not been uploaded into the Veterans Affairs database, so we need some place to start to go look for these files. And if they already have a case manager with Veterans Affairs, it's always good to put it on there. And then please date it and send it back as soon as possible to the address at the bottom, the fax number, or the email address. The assistance that Ontario Command has provided so far as of October 23rd, 2023, we've helped 1,136 homeless veterans in 197 communities. And of the 1,136 veterans, 127 of them were female and 52 were families. And this is growing every day. Our assistance that we've provided is over $3 million. And this is money that has not been given by the government or any other organization. This is the money that's raised through the Poppy campaign, through the donations, through our Ladies Auxiliary, through some really great fundraisers like Rec to Remember. And we have very generous people that donate, and we use that money very wisely. None of it's used for administration. We have apartment kits that we use when a veteran moves into their new home. You have to remember, a veteran coming from a homeless situation doesn't know what they need to be in their first apartment in many years. So we try to put together something that is relative to everyday living. Everything that you and I take for granted, we try to put in a 72-liter plastic tub along with a pot and pan set, bed in a bag, pillows, some Tupperware. And in that tub comes everything from cutlery, plates, towels, utensils, everything that a veteran will need for one day in their new home. We also include handmade items like Afghans and quilts and handmade dish rags so that they have something that feels like home. Sometimes our veterans move into a shared accommodation, so we tailor an apartment kit down to a shared accommodation kit for them, which is a little bit more what they would use in a bedroom type situation. We do backpacks. These are made up summer, winter, male, female. Some of the items have been supplied by our Ladies Auxiliary. The multicolored plastic square that you see on the rolled up one are actually ground mats made up by recycled milk wrappers. They're woven together to keep the veteran off the ground. These are usually given out to veterans that are living rough, and it can be the first step into gaining the trust so they will come back and try to fill out applications for benefits that they're entitled to. Our comfort backpacks, we wanted to put a first aid kit in each one of them, and St. John's Ambulance was wonderful. With that cold call, we actually got 100 socks donated to us to put in the backpacks, and we got a sponsor to donate recycled cell phones so that veterans can contact their family. We give them a SIM card. They set them up with Chatter for 1 month. Now, the nice part of this, that even if they can't afford after a month, the phone is internet capable, so they can go on to a voice over internet protocol on the internet, and they can actually contact their family, stay in touch with their Veterans Affairs people, or go online. The Ladies Auxiliary, they have furnished 10 apartments in the Pan Am buildings in the GTA, and Ratona, I think there were 30 that they put, stoves and fridges in there. They are wonderful ladies. They are incredible at fundraising. This summer, they gave out gift packs that were valued at $200 for our homeless or recently housed veterans. And every Christmas, it seems like I reach out to them to help Santa out a little bit by providing some gifts for families that just can't seem to make ends meet over the holidays. As I was saying earlier, Joe Sweeney Fund, he was a Korean War veteran, and he has been a special advisor to Ontario Command. He was homeless. He brought himself out of homelessness and knows the pitfalls and helped us navigate how to help veterans. Veterans are very proud, and to ask for help, we have to remember that that takes a lot for them to ask for help. So we want to be very respectful of that. This is a charitable, part of our charitable foundation. So tax receipts are able to be issued. This is for corporations and individuals to donate to our fund. We realized that dental health was just as important as everything else in life. Having a nice smile gives you the confidence to go out and find a job, and it makes you healthier all around. So we went to George Brown, Algonquin, and Parkwood Institute and have started this program with their students, and it has gone over very well. We reached out to law enforcement and stated that they needed to become partners with us because veterans find themselves on the wrong side of the law occasionally. And we wanted them to be able to access our paperwork from the police vehicles. Two veterans at Toronto Police Services realized that this is great, but the training to know who a veteran is and how to assist a veteran from law enforcement side was almost as important, if not more important. So the Military Veterans Wellness Program was rolled out on September 8th, 2022. So this form is available to law enforcement within their network, and they can fill it out and send it off to Veterans Affairs, to Operation Leave the Streets Behind at the Legion, and to the Operational Stress Injury Social Services. And we will reach out to the veteran and see what assistance we can provide. Our ongoing future projects. Dental in the north is still a big issue. Housing around the Golden Horseshoe and London. Veterans Transition Programs, Military Family Resource Center, and the Veterans Transition Network. We stay in constant contact with them and help where we can. We're looking at getting involved in criminal justice. Similar to Mental Health Day in court, we're trying to do the same for our veterans. And we're rolling out the Military Wellness Program to the RCMP and other law enforcement. So our motto is to ensure that every veteran who's homeless or at risk of becoming homeless finds the help they need to leave the streets behind. Thank you. Operation Leave the Streets Behind started in 2000.
Hello, 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 hello.
Not a tech person, so that was just
All right, so that concludes our presentations. Now we have some time for some dialogue. I don't have a roaming mic, unfortunately. We do have a mic there, but also it's a small space, so if you want to speak loudly, I can repeat the question into the mic for purposes of recording, but if you want to come up, there's that too.
You can lean into the mic just so it's that loud.
I'm probably not even helping with the mic. So do we have any questions for Marie or Debbie? Yeah, go ahead.
So earlier on, you mentioned about the amount of different community groups. So Indigenous people is quite a large number of. I'm just wanting to know what's the success with getting those people engaging with the services, because my understanding is that that's a big challenge in all areas. So what and if there is that, what are those numbers, and if you have those numbers, how can we address that, and how can we make changes to support those people?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think this is an area that communities are continuing to work on, developing partnerships with Indigenous organizations. And certainly folks have recognized, I think, as the Veteran Homelessness Program, folks could put in proposals to Infrastructure Canada for resources. A lot of communities identified this was an area where, Indigenous specific organizations needed to be leading the work and have put in requests for that kind of support in their communities. So I don't have the numbers within the data that we had. The communities would have that data for sure at their level, but certainly recognizing, to reach folks, Indigenous veterans are going to need a culturally appropriate approach led by Indigenous organizations.
Sorry, just quickly to add on from that. So I noticed one of your slides earlier on showed some of the kind of the measurements and partnership engagement, and it wasn't all provinces. So why is that? And are we moving forward to get capturing all of these numbers right across Canada, and getting those multi-agencies to start working together addressing veteran homelessness?
Yeah, I know from ours, it really is communities that have sort of said, we want to take a lead in this, we want to do this work. So, I mean, it's very much sort of sign up by participation. And I did just want to say too, I was sort of showing some of the key veteran partners that are available across Canada. Of course, there'd be other veteran partners that might be specific to a particular community that they would be tapping into as well. And I also am very sorry, I meant to say at the beginning, thank you to anyone in the room for your service if you served. And Debbie, you might speak to just your count across Canada.
Yeah, so what we did notice in doing our count across Canada is, you're asking specifically about Indigenous veterans. As Marie said, kind of a culturally appropriate response is necessary. As much as we say all the time that, serving in the Canadian Armed Forces is not just a job, it is a culture in and of itself. And then we have Indigenous veterans who served, we're dealing with their culture as well. And I think, they want to be understood, whether it be their Indigenous culture or their military culture. So I think having, not just one organization is going to fix the problem. I think it's a community approach, and, making sure that there are those Indigenous organizations kind of at the table to help is key.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a question in the back.
We're not currently asking, so I love that. But I'm in a little town of British Columbia. I'm sure I've seen some, but it just didn't register that there were additional services, and that's one of the things that we do. Well, can our people access all of these services from the West Coast, and do we have to sign up with somebody to enable that, or do we just?
Hi, I'm with the Legion Foundation, BCU Cook.
Oh, good.
So the presentation was from the Ontario Command, and they've been at this work a very long time. We're about a decade behind them, but following the same model. We do the backpacks, apartment kits, and then have some sort of transitional housing for veterans in Victoria, and we're in Veterans House Canada. Hope to have more really soon in Victoria to support. But yeah, there's Legion branches all over the province, and we use them as our point of contact. So chat with me later, and we'd be happy to connect.
And I just look forward. Is Coast Guard?
Sorry, I would just say in terms of the Respect Forum, so I mean, that's a group that helps pull together kind of social services and first responders and veteran and military supports in a community to kind of get to know one another and share services. So I mean, they may be pulling in some cases Coast Guard into some of those conversations potentially.
I would also say too, just as an answer to that, Marie, did you want to talk about how they can access Built for Zero resources?
I was going to let Debbie share because you're a national organization and folks can access your services.
Yes, so we are a national organization. So if you do have veterans amongst your clientele, you can reach out through our website or our toll-free number, and we do provide support coast to coast. As far as Coast Guard, unfortunately, no, because we receive most of our funding from Veterans Affairs. We stick to Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP veterans.
And in regards to the resources that are on our website, so while we're working specifically with communities who are helping to peer support one another and to kind of navigate that and providing some support, all of the materials are available on the website and you can access them and use them in any way that's helpful in your community.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. No, I thought there was another one, but
Okay.
go ahead.
So there was a list of reasons for homelessness. What are the statistics on that? Because my assumption would be, I'm ex-military, and so is my husband. My assumption would be that PTSD would be quite high. Have you got statistics on the reasons for homelessness within this group?
Sure. I know that Cheryl Forchuk is in the back there, and she did quite a research project a few years ago, and I can let her speak to that. But from our perspective, we did an informal survey a few years ago. We asked questions of 54 veterans of different questions, and one of those was what they felt was the main reason that they became homeless. And for us, mental health and addictions was quite high on that list. But Cheryl might want to talk about their study because it said something a little different.
Because we did the first national study of homeless veterans back in 2014. The first one. And so we were assuming it was PTSD because the vast majority of research on homeless veterans comes from the US. And that's what they've done. Like in their case, sometimes 25% of the shelter population are veterans, but it's a different culture. So you've got young people, 18, 19, going to the arena of war and that. Now, when we talk to our operational stress injury clinics, PTSD is the major thing they deal with, addiction second. When we went across the country and talked to veterans, how, and we did a long like a narrative about their life, what got them into homelessness, what they thought would take to get them out of it. What they identified was addiction and primary addiction, not secondary to PTSD. And it was primarily alcoholism. They talked about that often that it's part of the culture of being in the military. Someone talked about being ordered to investigate or to have drinks with your colleagues as part of what they need to be doing was often heavily subsidized, the cost of it. but they didn't feel that they actually had a true problem with alcoholism while in the military, but that their drinking had increased. But when they came out and had difficulty adjusting to civilian life, the complete lack of structure, then they ended up falling back more on the drinking and so in the US, in that literature, which is the majority of all literature, people were generally homeless 6 months after leaving service. In Canada, we've got almost a decade later. In many cases, from leaving the service to actually become homeless, because alcoholism is a much slower thing to develop if you start in your 20s. And when we asked people what it would take to get them out of it, and that's what we built in the 4 cities, was highly successful. We only had 2 people return to homelessness, one of them very briefly across all 4 sites. But what they said is they needed harm reduction because it was primary alcoholism. And that so even shelters or other places where it was zero tolerance did not work for them. They felt that reclaiming the identity of veteran, because when you're in substance, you lose your self-esteem. It's one of the first things that die, right? And they felt reclaiming the identity as a veteran was going to be part of their path of recovery. Which you would not do if it was PTSD, would not have the military experience for anyone who thinks that this is what they wanted. That's what they wanted, a particular kind of peer support that understood both homeless culture and veteran culture, and that they were navigating the 2 worlds. Initially, they said they wanted structured programs, and with other veterans, when we did the 4-city project, at the very first set of focus groups, they said, actually, we need to learn how to create their own college, or their own structure. So we got back therapists and that helped them create their own structure. But for all those studies that we did, it was primarily alcoholism, sometimes other substances, but definitely substance use.
But alcohol and substances are used as a coping mechanism, and it's used for mental health.
Yeah, I mean, it is a mental illness in and of itself, but there's such a thing in diagnosis. We talk about primary alcoholism and secondary. So you often would see, for example, secondary alcoholism with someone with PTSD, but that's not what they were describing. They were talking about it as being primary, not secondary to something else. And as I said, when we put it in the form, we included that. They were providing mental health services. They were certainly confirming that it was primary alcoholism.
Thanks, Joe. There was a question here. Did you still have a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Then Mark, I'll come to you.
Regarding Built for Zero, so in Fort McMurray, when you're engaged in the community, did the municipal government engage you in hitting that target of that net zero?
Yeah, so in Built for Zero, communities sort of identify a lead, and those leads help pull together, the group in the community and to do that work. It was Fort McMurray, the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, who we were primarily connected with, and then they were working to help sort of coordinate the local work.
Were they using like the housing first methodology in trying to address it?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things as we're going through, how is your system set up? How are you supporting folks? Like, we're looking also to ensure that folks are implementing best practices, that it's housing focused, housing first.
And you're going to call me when the conference is over, right?
Yep.
There you go. Perfect. Mark, and then I'll.
I just want to sort of support the good professor here, because I was commissioned in 1980 and I retired 24 years later. And boy, did we wait. I was in the combat. And it really, you were bang on, your story is perfect. But I think people need to, sometimes when you're working with veterans, you got to remember they are what they were when. They're not people today smoking weed. There are people who are way back in sort of the booze time. So it is a killer for them. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Mark. Question over there.
I just have a question nameless. Is there ever any hesitancy for veterans to consent to be on it? And also, what are they exactly consenting to? Like, yeah, what are the, like,
Yeah,
where is
great
their
question.
information going?
Yep. So that might look a little bit different in every community, but essentially they would be signing a consent. They would be sharing some identifying information, usually at least a name so that you can and where they are so you can follow up with them. And then over time, they may share further information. Again, communities might be managing that a bit differently, but they should be explaining that in the consent, and folks do need to consent. And if they don't, I think, we keep working with folks to try to reach out and engage and offer support. So yeah, I mean, I think it's an ongoing process. And I would say, veterans and non-veterans, there may be a small percentage who identify that they don't want to share that information initially. It doesn't mean they're not eligible for other services in the community or for emergency type services in the community. But again, folks are going to keep engaging and trying to build that trust so that folks are at a point where they're willing to share. Really, they're consenting to share their information kind of with a key group of folks in the community who are working together to end homelessness. So it's a shared consent that the whole community is using, getting the consent to be like, you know what, you don't need to tell your story to me and to 10 other people. We're going to work together and try to wrap around you to offer you the support you need. And we're only going to share that information with those who need to know it.
And would that include like hospitals, or is it more like corporate hospitals?
Again, each community might bring different partners to the table in a way that makes sense. It often starts with sort of the homelessness response system. And in the case of veterans, you'd also be extending that to veteran service organizations. Folks can often in those consents say, you know what, there's a particular organization I don't want to share my information with. They can revoke their consent if they want to. And all of that should be explained as part of the consent process.
Thank you. Yeah, in the back.
Age demographic, do you want to speak?
I can only speak from the veterans that we've supported, but the average age for us is mid-50s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Again, the communities at the local level would have that information. When folks submit data to us, it's non-identifying, it's aggregate data. They would have more data at the local level. But certainly, and we've been really encouraging, and this is some of the myths and facts, is don't forget to ask youth, because there are youth who could be part of school programs as young as 16, 18 that have had that connection. And so folks have seen a range. So we've had a few youth all the way up to, for sure, older adults. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, homelessness is so dynamic. And I think what you found 10 years ago might, there might be some differences today. The national point in time count, had some information as well. And we've tried to compile all those kind of key data resources on our website.
Veterans service community there too. Yeah. And I know that I've never conceived of this being a source of services for them.
Yeah. So it said, I think 40% of veterans are age 65 plus. And, I think we'd see a lot of older folks, but I think folks more and more are also seeing younger folks and women and others for sure.
There's a question over here. Yeah.
It's actually more of a comment for anybody who's working front lines, sort of pertaining to what you're saying. I work for Veterans Affairs, and something veterans can be hard to find. So when you put in contact with somebody, or on your YouTube forums, not only like you just ask for their veterans, but asking it in ways. So like asking if they served, or asking if they have a more uniform, and then just figuring out what.
Yeah, I'm not doubting that.
Yeah, no, like for anybody who designing their intake forms or redesigning their intake forms for real. I just want to give a shout out for like the importance of some people might not identify as a veteran even, like so they might say no, not a veteran. Yeah.
And we found a lot of folks don't know, so they may not, I mean, there's many reasons people won't share that they're a veteran, but sometimes, and we've come across even workers in the system as they've started to do this work, they're like, oh, I guess I'm a veteran. Like I would never have considered myself a veteran. That's held in very high regard. And if you haven't fought overseas, but there's lots of folks who are going to be eligible for services and supports and don't even realize that. Yeah, Cheryl.
I was just gonna say, sorry, this project letter. Like, two things, like, I agree, we found the most common reason people did not want to say they were a veteran, they thought they were kind of approaching living a veteran. Because of the issues that they had, and that's why reclaiming that was important, and you may have to ask several ways. The other thing we found and as I said, we've done about 3 different studies over the years, was that they very often do not tend to use some of the traditional services such as shelters, although if they do, it's very short and temporary. The first place they go is the Legion, and so we found partnering with the Legion is super important. When we talked to the Legion about where were the communities that had the most requests for the hockey fund, we found it was often the smaller communities outside the urban centers. And again, even when we would find people and talk to them, they would often say, well, they're out living out in the woods, whatever, but they'll come in once a month to a shelter to buy supplies, to have any doctor's appointments. And then some of the hypothesing says, oh, veterans have short, frequent incidents of homelessness. We know they've been homeless for 10 years, but coming to town once a month. When they do go into shelter, one of the ways we actually often found them is they'd be the ones wiping the table. They were trying to create structure, trying to do some good while they were there. So if we were in the shelter, we often found them there. We often found them up in London. We found them under bridges. Because they were avoiding the shelter when they were coming into town. But just as an example, the Legion in Lower Saxville had no requests from here than Halifax. We went up to the top, because we went to the 10 communities and tried to do some community development. It was not Winnipeg. It was Surrey, not Vancouver. So it is often these smaller communities, sometimes in the woods, sometimes in campus. So they are hard.
But also say we found you can't just ask once. You need to ask multiple times. They may not share initially. And I do want to just give a shout out to Debbie as well, because this is something I learned as we were chatting, like having a 24/7, 7 days a week, holidays, phone line where people can also just phone if they're looking for a listening ear. And Debbie will often be the one on weekends and holidays who is manning that phone. And so a shout out to you and the work you're doing and having that number available across Canada.
Thanks, folks. Any other questions or comments? Going once, going twice. All right, go ahead.
I got one more because it's concerning. I get a lot of calls from our Legion Service Bureau about people trying to get a hold of the numbers on Indigenous First Nation veterans in the North and the services available to them. So, in terms of Built for Zero and Vets Canada, like, are services available in the North for those Indigenous veterans? We don't even really have the numbers on these up there. Like, do you guys have data on those numbers?
We have just the numbers like that I shared earlier. I think we have one volunteer in the North but we are connected to the legions there and other resources that are available. So they know about us. So we kind of operate more on a referral basis from the north because we're not physically there. So I don't have numbers really, like probably accurate numbers of how many there are, just, the ones that we've been able to interact with. It's definitely harder to support somebody there, but it's doable. I know actually recently during the fires in Northwest Territories, Charlene actually supported a lot of veterans families who were evacuated out of there. We were able to provide support to them in Edmonton. But as far as having boots on the ground there, we're very limited.
There are some national Indigenous veteran organizations. And I would say for us, it's been a little bit like, and again, I worked in local community for many years before I joined the Canadian Alliance and Built for Zero. And we had been told, there's resources for veterans, but it's really peeling an onion to learn all about who those folks are, how to make contact, to start to even begin to scratch the surface of sort of military and veteran culture. And so I'm just humbly saying that is still, I think, an area for further development. I know the Respect Forum has an Indigenous veteran advisory group. And so we're thinking, is there a way we can connect with that group as we keep learning more and kind of leaning into those national organizations and what they might be offering or know about folks experiencing homelessness who are Indigenous veterans.
Great. All right, last call.
What's a veteran again? Like, I know they serve, but is it a length of time?
Want to share again?
Well, VAC, and everyone, and I think folks are saying generally, if you have been part of basic training, you have made that connection enough to be eligible for at least some services and resources.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for coming to our session today. Appreciate it. A big thank you to our speakers, Debbie and Marie. Thank you. And to our virtual presenters as well. Big shout out to them. Thank you all for being here. And enjoy the snacks and the break. See you at the next one.